Hello everyone and welcome to today's lecture on image classification, which will focus on supervised and unsupervised classification. This is a crucial topic in the fields of Earth observation and data analysis. Understanding this concept will help us better analyze and interpret complex data sets. To begin, let's define what we mean by classification in the context of remote sensing and data analysis. Classification is categorizing the data into different classes or groups based on their attributes. For instance, in satellite imagery, we might classify pixels to identify land cover types like forest, water body, urban area, and agricultural fields, or thematic class like change or anomaly. This allows us to extract meaningful information from the image and create thematic maps that represent different features on the Earth's surface. There are two main types of classification: supervised classification and unsupervised classification. Both have unique methodology, strengths, application, and we will explore these in detail today. Let's start with supervised classification. In supervised classification, we use a label dataset to train an algorithm to recognize different classes. A label dataset means that each data point or pixel in our image has a node class, such as forest, water, or urban. The goal is to use this label data to train the model, and that can accurately predict the class of new or unseen data. There are some key concepts in supervised classification. First is training data. This is a set of examples where each example is associated with no class. For instance, in remote sensing, we might have pixels labeled as forest or urban. The second one is classifier. A classifier is a model or algorithm that assigns a class label to each data point based on the training data. This could be a decision tree, a neural network, or a support vector machine. The third one is decision boundary. This line or curve separate different classes into feature space. A good classifier will find the optimal decision boundaries that maximize class separation. There are several techniques commonly used in supervised classification. First one is maximum likelihood classification, which we call MLC. The second one is support vector machine, SVM, random forest, RF, or neural network, as CNNs. So let's walk through each technique of this supervised classification. The maximum likelihood classification assumes that the statistics for each class are normally distributed and calculated the probability of each pixel belong to a particular class. The pixel is then assigned to the class with the highest probability. For example, maximum likelihood classification is often used in agricultural mapping to differentiate between various crop types based on their spectral signature. The second technique in supervised classification is support vector machine (SVM). This is a powerful classifier that works by finding the optimal hyperplane that separates different classes in a high-dimensional space. This is particularly effective for datasets where classes are not linearly separable. For example, SVM can be used in land cover classification to handle high-dimensional data and provide robust results, even when the classes overlap in some feature space. The third technique is the random forest. This is an ensemble method that use multiple decision trees to improve classification accuracy. Each tree votes on the class of its pixel, and then majority votes is taken as the final classification. Random forest is useful in a complex environment like urban area, where there are multiple land cover types present. And the next one is neural network. This model after the human brain, neural network consists a layer of interconnected nodes that learn to recognize patterns in the data. Convolutional neural network, what we call CNNs, are particularly effective for image classification tasks. For example, neural networks are widely used for more advanced tasks such as identifying specific features like disease in the crop due to their ability to model complex patterns. The process of supervised classification typically involves the following steps: data collection, train the classifier, classification, and accuracy assessment. First, as data collection, we have to gather a representative sample of label data. For remote sensing, this could mean selecting areas of known land cover types. Training the classifier. Use the label data to train the classifier, adjusting parameters to minimize classification error. And the third step, classification. That means when we try to apply the trained classifier to the entire dataset to assign each pixel to a class. And then after that, we have to evaluate the classifier performance using a confusion matrix or other statistical measure to define the accuracy of the classification. There are a lot of ways to apply supervised classification. In the field of natural resources management, supervised classification is invaluable for mapping and monitoring the distributions of forests, wetlands, and other nature ecosystems. This information is essential for conservation efforts, tracking deforestation and habitat loss, and managing the sustainable use of natural resources. Agencies can leverage this insight to inform policy decisions, target interventions, and assess the environmental impact of human activity. Supervised classification also play a crucial role in urban planning and management, enabling the accurate mapping and monitor the land use pattern, transportation network, and the growth of built-up area by identifying residential, commercial, industrial, and recreational zones. Urban planners can make data-driven decisions to support sustainable development, improve infrastructures, and address pressing issues like urban sprawl and resource allocation. In the aftermath of natural disasters such as flood, wildfire, or earthquake, supervised classification can be used to rapidly map the extent of damage and identify affected areas. This information is essential for coordinating emergency response efforts, allocating resources, and assessing the long-term impact of community after and the environment. By combining satellite imagery with ground-based data, decision maker can make informed decisions to support relief effort and long-term recovery initiative. Supervised classification algorithm can be applied to satellite and area imagery to accurately identify and map different crop types, monitor crop health, and estimate yield. This information is crucial for agricultural planning, resource allocation, and ensuring food security, especially in developing regions. By tracking changes in cropland and detecting anomalies, policymakers and farmers can make more informed decisions to improve agricultural productivity and resilience. Besides the application in many fields and major, supervised classification also face a lot of challenge and limitation. First is data availability and quality. Supervised classification heavily rely on the availability and quality of labor training data. In many real-world scenarios, obtaining comprehensive and representative crowd truth data can be a significant challenge, particularly in remote or inaccessible areas. Additionally, the training data may suffer from inaccuracy, bias, or temporal mismatch with the satellite or imagery being classified, leading to suboptimal classification performance. The second challenge is the class separability and complexity. The success of supervised classification is often contingent on the separability of the target land cover or land use classes. In cases where the spectral, spatial, or contextual characteristics of the classes overlap significantly, the classification algorithm may struggle to accurately distinguish between them. This challenge is further exacerbated in complex, heterogeneous landscapes where the land cover classes exhibit a high degrees of spatial and temporal variability. The third one should we mention is the scales and resolution limitation. The spatial and spectral resolutions of the remote sensing data can limit the level of details and accuracy that can be achieved through supervised classification. Coarser resolution imagery may be unable to capture the nuance of smaller landscape features, while high-resolution data can introduce computational and processing challenges. Consequently, the choice of appropriate sensor and spatial scales is crucial for meeting the specific requirement for application at hand. And the last one is the contextual and temporal factor. Supervised classification models often struggle to account for the complex contextual and temporal factors that can influence land cover and land use patterns. Environmental conditions such as weather, soil moisture, or phenological change, as well as socio-economic factors like urbanization and land management practice, can significantly impact the spectral and spatial characteristics of the target classes, leading to classification errors or inconsistencies over time. Now, let's move to unsupervised classification. Unlike supervised classification, unsupervised classification does not require label data. Instead, it identifies natural grouping or pattern within the data by analyzing its structure. This technique is often used when we don't have prior knowledge of the class or when we want to explore new patterns in the data. There are two concepts of um, unsupervised classification, which includes clustering. That is the process of grouping a set of objects into clusters, where objects in the same cluster are more similar to each other than those in other clusters. This is the core idea behind unsupervised classification. And the second one is class separability, the degree to which different clusters are distinct from each other. Good class separability means that the clusters are well defined and separate in the feature space. There are several techniques are commonly used in unsupervised classification, with namely K-mean clustering, isodata, hierarchical clustering, and spectral clustering. So let's walk through one by one. K-mean clustering, a popular partitioning method that divides data into K-clusters. The algorithm starts with K initial centroids and iteratively assigns each data point to the nearest centroid, updating the centroids based on the means of assigned points. For example, the K-means can group pixels in a satellite image into the cluster representing different land cover types, such as water, vegetation, and urban area, which can be labeled based on expert knowledge. Choosing a case is a crucial step but can be challenging, as the optimal case is not always readily apparent. Techniques like EBO methods and Stewart analysis can help guide the selection. The limitations of K-mean clustering is sensitive to the initial placements of centroids and assumes the spherical cluster, which may not be the case in real-world data. The second technique is isodata, which stands for Interactive Self-Organizing Data Analysis Technique. It is an extension of K-means that interactively adjusts the numbers of clusters by merging and splitting them based on specific criteria, such as cluster size and variance. For example, the isodata is useful when the numbers of classes is not known beforehand, such as when exploring the new geographic area with a node land cover type. The next one, hierarchy cluster. The hierarchical clustering is a method that builds hierarchies of clusters by either merging smaller clusters into larger ones or splitting the larger cluster into smaller ones based on measure of similarity. The hierarchical clustering can be used in ecological study to classify regions based on vegetation type and their hierarchical relationship from individual species to broader vegetation zone. The algorithm starts by treating each data point as its own cluster, then interactively merging the two closest clusters until the single cluster remains. The resultant diagram visually represents the hierarchical structure, enabling analysis to identify optimal clustering solution based on their specific need and constraint. Within the hierarchical clustering, we have two main approaches: agglomerative clustering and divisive clustering. Agglomerative clustering, which starts with individual data points and merging them into commonly used, and divisive clustering starts with all data points together and split them. Choosing the right approach depends on the data and desired outcome. The last technique is spectral clustering. This leverages the eigenstructures of the similarity matrix to identify a cluster with complex, convex shape. By analyzing the eigenvector of similar matrix, spectral clustering can uncover intricate patterns and relationships with the data, even when the cluster exhibits irregular boundary or overlap with one another. This makes a valuable tool for exploring the diverse and heterogeneous landscapes observed in satellite and aerial imagery. But in general, the process of unsupervised classification includes 4 steps: data preparation, clustering, post-classification labeling, and validation and interpretation. Data preparation. This is the pre-process the data to ensure it is suitable for clustering, which may include normalization or dimensionality reduction. And the next step, clustering, we have to apply the chosen clustering algorithm to group data into the cluster, and up and post classification labeling that interprets the cluster by assigning the meaningful label to them based on additional information or expert knowledge. And then finally, we have to validate an interpretation by assess the quality of the cluster using the metric like COLS score or by comparing them with no data or expert interpretation. Supervised classification techniques have found widespread application across various domains within Earth observation field, empowering researchers, urban planners, and environmental managers to unlock valuable insight from complex geospatial datasets. This can be land cover and land use mapping, change detection, and anomaly detection. Unsupervised classification have identified and mapped broad categories of land cover types across the larger geographical area. By analyzing spectral and spatial features of Earth observation data, the algorithm group pixels with similar characteristics into clusters. The cluster can be interpreted and labeled as land cover types like natural vegetation like forests, grasslands, wetlands, view of area like urban area, transportation network, water body like river, lake, and oceans, bare rock and soil. And the next applications of unsupervised classification is change detection. Unsupervised methods have identified areas of significant change in Earth observation data over time by analyzing the temporal difference between two or more datasets, like comparing imagery from different years. The algorithm can identify pixels that have undergone significant changes in their spectral or spatial characteristics. These changes might indicate deforestation, the loss of forest cover, urban expansion, like growth of human settlements, or natural disaster like flood or wildfire. These have to detect potential areas of change before they become visually apparent in the data, which is called early detection, or the largest scale analysis. It facilitates the efficiency analysis of change across the larger geographical region and identify potential threats. Early detection of change allow for proactive measures to address environmental concerns like deforestation or land degradation. And the last one, anomaly detection. Unsupervised classification can be used to detect pixels that deviate significantly from the norm, potentially indicate anomaly in the data. By identifying cluster that deviates from majority of the data points, the algorithm can highlight areas that might require further investigation. Potential anomalies in Earth observation data might include wildfire, that is the areas of high temperature and specific spectral signature, oil spills, distinctive patterns on water surface, illegal deforestation, unusual change in vegetation cover. This have a lot in early warning system. It's useful to develop an early warning system for environmental threats like wildfire or oil spill. And this have an identify area worthy or further investigation with additional data analysis or ground-based surveys. And it also have to monitor environmental change by provide valuable insight into the health and stability of ecosystem. And the applications of the other application on supervised classification can be resource explorations, environmental monitoring, and urban planning by analyzing the spatial pattern for infrastructure development and zoning. So we already learned about supervised classification and unsupervised classification. So the difference between supervised and unsupervised classification include three features: the training data. The supervised classification required label training data, while unsupervised classification does not. And supervised classification predict specific classes based on training, while unsupervised classification identify natural groupings in the data without predefined label. If we're talking about the use case, supervised classification is more suited for application where classes are well defined and label data is available. Unsupervised classification is better for exploratory analysis or when no label data exists. And if we're talking about the similarity, the both methods aim to categorize data into meaningful groups or classes, and both rely on the quality of the input data and can benefit from pre-processing steps such as normalization and feature extraction. The key principles of and practice aspect of the image classification that we have to understanding the data and choosing the right approach. The choice between supervised and unsupervised classification often depend on the characteristics of the data available. For instance, if you have labeled dataset with no data, supervised classification is generally more effective. Conversely, if you lack labeled data or want to explore the new pattern, unsupervised classification is more appropriate. And different algorithms are used for different types of data and application. For example, SVMs are effective for high-dimensional data, while k-means clustering is suitable for initial exploratory analysis to identify both potential clusters. And the second one we have to take into account is the practice considerations in implementation. Pre-processing, feature selection, and parameter tuning. Thing that we have to take into account. Pre-processing is both supervised and unsupervised classification benefit from pre-processing steps such as normalization and noise reduction to enhance the data quality and classification accuracy. The feature selection is try to identifying the relevant feature. For example, spectral bands, textural feature is crucial in both approach. In supervised classification, features must correlate strongly with the classes. In unsupervised classification, features should enhance the cluster separability. And the last one, parameter tunings. Both methods often require parameter tuning. For example, in supervised classification, the parameter of neural network or SVMs need careful adjustment to avoid overfitting. In unsupervised classification, selecting an appropriate numbers of cluster in case means or ISO data can significantly impact results. And the accuracy and validations of the assessments is we have to, in supervised classification, a confusion matrix is valuable tool for assessing classification accuracy. It shows the relationship between the class label and predicted class label, providing insight into the classifier performance. Cluster validation in unsupervised classification, evaluating the quality of cluster is crucial. The techniques like Seulat score, Dunn index, or Debye Bowling indexes have access to how well separated and cohesive the clusters are. And the last one is the integration with both data source, with other data source, that we have to combine. Supervised and unsupervised methods can be leverage the strengths of both. For instance, supervised classification can help identify the potential class or patterns which can be refined using supervised methods. So, to conclude, that supervised and unsupervised are the powerful tools in data analysis, machine learning, and Earth observation. These methods have unique strengths and it suits to different types of problem and data. Understanding when and how to apply these techniques is essential for achieving accurate and meaningful results. In the future, we have to, if we talk about the future direction, if with the developments of AI and deep learning, this use of deep learning methods like convolutional neural network is expanding, offering the potential to improve both supervised and unsupervised classification tasks through better feature extractions and pattern recognition. The multi-sensor data fusions combine data from multiple sensors like optical, radar, LiDAR with supervised and unsupervised methods can enhance classification accuracy and provide more comprehensive insight into complex phenomena. And the last one, we should say that adaptive and real-time classification with advancements in computing power and algorithms, real-time and adaptive classification methods are becoming feasible, allowing for a dynamic updating of classification as new data becomes available. So, in conclusion, both supervised and unsupervised classification techniques are integral to many fields, from remote sensing and planning and urban planning to agricultural and environmental monitoring. By understanding these principles, methods, and application, we can better harness their potential to analyze and interpret complex data sets. Okay, thank you for your attention, and I look forward to discussing this topic further in our lab section and future lecture.